Reb Comer, account manager at Hook, joins me today on Sales Unfiltered to discuss how to prevent churn, a vital part of every CSM and AM's role. This is one of the most actionable episodes we've done, where Reb shares advice on how to spot risk, keep customers engaged, and how to effectively split your time. Churn isn't always a bad thing, but it's integral to understand your customer health, and Reb gives some real-life examples on how to do this. We discuss tracking key indicators for risk, the difference between good and bad customer engagement, creative ways to trigger customer engagement, engaging with quieter accounts, and Reb shares how she plans her week, going through each day and her key objectives. Let's get into it. To kick off the conversation, it would be really helpful for our listeners to understand the context of your role as an account manager at Hook and what you're responsible for.
Yeah, of course. So as an account manager at Hook, I have a broad range of responsibilities because I think that is the nature of a startup, right? Yeah. Everybody wears a lot of hats. So in the customer team, we've got the support function, we've got implementation managers, and then everything else is basically down to the account manager, which is my role. So we have to look after churn, manage renewals, think about adoption, think about quarterly business reviews, think about escalations if something isn't being managed in a timely way by support. So we've got a very, very broad range of things that we have to deal with. And I think a lot of people who work in any startup can definitely relate to that feeling.
Master of all.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
You say that with gritted smile.
Yeah.
You're like, weekends are needed.
Yeah, definitely.
When you can take them. And we're going to 100% get into this because I think especially working for a startup and managing so much, sometimes your customers can think that they are at the top of your priority list, but you've got so many other things to focus on. So we'll get onto that topic a bit later on in the conversation. But when we speak about preventing churn, I think it's an interesting conversation to start off with the question of, is churn always a bad thing?
Yeah, I think that is a really great question to start asking, because sometimes there is churn in the business that you might not regret. There may be occasions where the sales team have maybe had a conversation with someone that maybe it wasn't the right person and they bought the product for the wrong reasons, for example, and then down the line it's just too hard to implement, or you might need to take a step back. Sometimes that churn is not regrettable because you don't want to spend a lot of resources on that, and you're kind of happy to let some customers like that go. There's other cases where actually having someone on board as a customer is maybe a bit of a negative experience if they're taking up way too much of your time, and then if they're going to maybe say something negative about your business anyway. So sometimes in situations like that, you can absolutely part ways with customers. Always try and take the high road, always try and do it in the proper way. But yeah, sometimes you just kind of have to take a churn hit if it's going to lead to too many negative consequences down the line.
And I think that's a really good point as well, because it's just down to timing as well. It might not be the right time now, but they might come back in the future.
Yeah.
So it's really important how you facilitate that offboarding. Is professional, it's done in the best way, and you're giving them the best experience so that they're going to look back and go, do you know what, I really enjoyed working with Reb. I'm going to come back.
Yeah, absolutely. And you might be well, at least in my case, it's business to business, right? And I think a lot of listeners will be more in the B2B space, but you're not just offboarding that customer, it's also the people. So it's not just the company, there's also the people element of it as well. And that person or those people might move on to different positions in the future. They might work at different companies, and in that world they can definitely come back to your product and to your service. So there's always that kind of thing to think about as well.
So true. And when we think about churn, there's so many different areas, and we'll go into spotting the risk, because I think so many key indicators can give you a bit of an alarm bell of like, right, you need to give this account a little bit more attention. Where would you say though that people are going wrong when they are trying to prevent churn? Because it probably can affect quite negatively if you're pushing a little bit too hard, maybe because you're a bit scared and worried, and it doesn't come across in the best authentic way.
Yeah, if the question is like, where do I think people are going wrong when it comes to detecting churn? I think people are trying to cover a really broad gambit. Like they're trying to go across all accounts all of the time, and you just cannot be on top of everything. I think that can be a bit of a struggle for people, is like not knowing where they should be prioritizing their time, or it's spending far too much time on some technical conversation that they're having, or getting into the weeds of a support ticket that maybe isn't actually going to have that much impact on whether the customer renews 6 months down the line or 9 months down the line. Like maybe it will, maybe it won't, but sometimes people find themselves spending their time in the wrong areas. And that's something that I can definitely relate to as well, because I know I've done that in my position as well. And so when it comes to spotting the churn risk, you really need to know like what are the key things to be looking out for, not spending time in the wrong areas of those.
You said that you have definitely spent time in the wrong places. Did you come to that realization from self-reflection or like learning when it did happen and you're like, oh no, that was a mistake? Or was it a colleague telling you?
I had one realization one evening at about 9 p.m. on a Monday night. We had kind of launched a new product to people, to a certain subset of customers. And because I'm London based, but as you know, most people are, they deal a lot with the US and with different time zones. And because we released this new product, I was like online on Slack, really trying to check in on everything. Like, is it okay? How's the release going? Like, has everything gone according to plan? And there was a couple of things that came up, and I found myself troubleshooting this, and I was really going into the weeds on it. And then I thought, I've just given up my whole Monday evening to help on something that, one, wasn't urgent, two, the key stakeholders weren't even aware of, it wasn't even on their radar, and three, that wasn't actually my job. Like it should, that, you know, we could have managed that much better with the support system. But I really felt like, oh no, if I get in on top of this now, this is definitely going to help the transition be smoother. And I might have helped, yes, a little bit, but was that the right place to be spending my evening? Was that the right place to be spending my time? In that given context, I would say probably not. Looking back, there, I would definitely try to manage that situation a bit better in the future.
Yeah, I am so guilty of feeling, because your job never ends. Like when you're in this role, especially when you're working with customers, you can never really be like, right, yeah, done everything. You're just like twiddling your thumbs. Everyone is serviced. Yeah, I can go home. There's always things to be doing that you can be working on. And so you actually just have to come to that realization that like, no, that can wait till tomorrow. Shut the laptop and nothing's going to burn down. Well, hopefully.
Hopefully nothing's going to burn down. Yeah, but yeah, it's definitely something that I have to consider as well. And I'm not advocating for like working late or, you know, working like these crazy hours or anything, but that was just one scenario where I wanted to be online and I wanted to be available, but then afterwards I thought, oh, I don't know how much value I have added here after all, even though I felt at the time when I was responding to all of these Slack messages like, oh, I'm helping so much here, but in the end, I don't know how much.
So you're like sharing with your manager, hey, by the way, I was online at 9 p.m.
Yeah.
Look how hardworking I am.
Yeah, well, thankfully we don't have that culture at Hook. Thankfully we're not like monitoring things like that. But yeah, I
pat the back, Reb.
Yeah, but I pat myself on the back.
You do that. You have that glass of wine to celebrate.
Yeah.
So when we look at our accounts that we're working with and we're thinking about what are those areas, those key indicators that we can see as alarm bells that they are going to potentially churn down the line, what would you say are the main things that you're looking out for?
When I look to spot risk, there's two key things that I think about. One is this top-down approach. So who are my key stakeholders? And I always go back to the sales conversation. I have a very strong handover with the AEs where I ask them, why did they buy Hook? Why did they buy this product? What are they trying to solve? And we document that very well. Before the customer even signs with Hook, we'll do a success planning session with them where we'll actually go through like what good will look like for them. So the first approach I take is that top-down approach where I go back to my key stakeholder and I always make sure, are we solving your problem? Are we solving your problem? Is my key stakeholder still engaged here? Or have they gone off on a tangent? Or have they passed this project over to someone else in their team? And maybe they did that because they're confident that everything is running smoothly, or maybe they did it because they've lost interest or it's not important for them anymore. So that's one thing I do to spot risk, is like really make sure that my key stakeholder is as engaged as I need them to be.
Would you ask them why they've moved it along? Yeah,
sometimes I would ask. I would say, I've noticed that, or they might say, hey, I'm passing this project over. I'm not going to be attending weekly calls. Now I'm going to, you know, I'll attend a call once a week, or once a month rather, or, you know, if they change the cadence of conversation. And I might ask to them, you know, is this because your job title is changing and it's not relevant anymore? Is it because you feel confident that we're in a good place and you can delegate this down to someone more junior in your team? I would definitely ask that question just to make sure that I know that I'm still meeting their needs.
Great.
And if their needs change, fine, let's document that. Let's talk about it and kind of redraft what they are. So my stakeholder engagement is one really important thing. And then the second thing for spotting risk is around, are people using this product? Because if my end users or people aren't logging in, then I already know from that one thing that probably they're not getting as much value as they should be if they've signed, if they've signed a big contract, they've got lots and lots of people who could be using the platform, but who aren't. I try to look at that adoption data and see what those numbers are. So looking at adoption, not just of like logins, but also what people are doing in the platform, what's their use case, how are they managing it day to day, and what kind of operational activities are they doing in there, because that really helps me to understand. What the churn risk is.
Yeah, and that data that you're collecting, how do you track that?
We track it in Hook.
Okay.
On Hook, yeah. So it's very much a product usage orientated platform.
Nice. And so then that has full visibility across the whole go-to-market function, so anybody can see what's going on with that account.
Yeah, exactly. So I log into Hook as an account manager. All of our sales team can log into Hook. Senior leadership are logging in as well. And that's universal across any of our customers who are using Hook as well. Anyone can log in. We don't sell like on a license basis or anything like that. So there's a lot of visibility.
I love that, because the reason I ask is the buzzword at the moment is like aligning your teams, whether it's like aligning sales and marketing or even product or CS, account management and sales. And I think it's so important for everybody to be able to have that single source of truth, understand what's going on, because there might be somebody within your team that's like, oh, Reb, like you logged this, I can help, let me jump in, instead of it just being you working on your own island and not feeling like you're collaborating as a whole team. Yeah,
definitely. I think that, you've really nailed it with that point around collaboration. And we have got a very, very collaborative team in my organization anyway. Sometimes I might think that I'm over communicating or that I'm raising things a little bit too early, but luckily my manager is in such a place that she will like actively take on any kind of conversation where we think there might be churn risk. So I could say like 9 months down the line, I'm worried about this customer that's up for renewal. And for us, for some orgs, 9 months is like not enough time to save a renewal, but in Hook, that's probably quite a lot of time to save a renewal. So we proactively have those conversations based on the data that we're seeing, and we kind of go through these reports every week and kind of determine, or every 2 weeks, we kind of determine like which ones do we need to be spending our time and focus on.
That's really great to hear. And is there anything when you're looking at risks that maybe you've thought, oh, there's a risk here with this account, but actually I've misjudged that, it's not a risk? And how have you navigated that? Because you're not always going to be able to get it 100% correct, and it could be a tricky conversation to have if you've sent them an email like, hey, what's going on? And then you're like, oh no, all good, they're just quiet.
No, definitely. Well, I think a customer being quiet, I think you have to watch out for that.
Right.
I think that's a big trap that CSMs or AMs fall into. Also, I'm guilty of that myself, where the customers who shout the loudest are the ones where you spend your time on, but then the ones that are quiet are you're less worried about them, but actually they're the ones who are secretly looking for other platforms, for example. But sometimes you can't be right all of the time. I throw stuff on Slack. I'm like, hey, I just got this email. Is this pass ag? Like, what is this customer saying? And then, or am I reading too much into it? Or they're acquiring somebody else. Like, do I need to panic now about the contracts that we have together? And then, people in my team will just come back to me and say, yeah, you're onto something, or they might just say, yeah, that's nothing to worry about. So I think, exactly, like chill. I definitely would validate a lot of things with people in my team as well. And I definitely have seen those emails come through from others, and I would jump in and be like, this is fine. I've seen it before.
And you're all together. You can just hold hands and be like, it's fine, calm down, panic's over. It's so funny, isn't it, though, when you're in that own state of mind, you're like, this feels like the world's crumbling, and you just need to be brought back to reality a little bit by your team. But there's a lot of work that you can do with an understanding about whether there's potential risk by understanding your customer fully, and like doing a lot of research of, have they just raised funding, are they hiring, because a lot of those are going to be key indicators. What are some key things that you look for to really make sure that you're staying up to date on what your customers are doing?
It's always, for me, just starting with the conversation with the customer. So always trying to make sure that I understand, like, do they have product releases coming out? Do they have any org changes in their business? Are like you mentioned, are they going through an upcoming fundraise? So I would often just ask these straight up to the customer, or if I've heard about it on the news, or if I've heard about it on LinkedIn, I would kind of just bring it up casually in that way as well. I know that some people do also have alerts set up, so that if there's if a Google alert comes up for their customers, I think that they can kind of get an alert for that. I think most of us are in a situation where that would be a little bit overwhelming. I know it would be for me because I've just got a bigger book of business. But if you had a handful of customers, I think something like that could be really effective. So you can see what's happening in the market. But yeah, luckily. We have very open communication with our customers, and people are generally okay to share kind of upcoming changes with us that we can kind of chat through and navigate together and partner on together as well. It's
great to hear that you speak to your customers a lot, and you have touched on whether they're using your platform and that being really valuable piece of information. But when we're talking about preventing churn, customer engagement is probably one of the highest things that you need to be focusing on. And I know that you're really keen on having a partnership. So could you talk a little bit more on this?
Yeah, definitely. So we've got the data-led approach where I can actually see what people are doing in the platform, which is great, but it doesn't always tell the full picture because sometimes people have a product that people just have to log into, even if they hate it, and even if they're actively saying every day, I don't like this product. So that's some of the picture. But customer engagement, I think, is so important that you can actually have an open conversation with your key stakeholders. So a lot of the time I would meet with my customers probably in the early days of onboarding, definitely at least once a week, because we need to give them valuable checkpoints in terms of how they're progressing through the onboarding and implementation phase. And then after we're live, we've delivered, the product is in the hands of the end users, I would probably speak to my customers about once every 2 weeks or once a month, depending on how hands-on they are. And these checkpoints usually are just around, like, how are they getting on? Are they getting the value that they need? Kind of bringing them up to date on some of the adoption metrics that they care about. A lot of people use our product for board reporting, so they might just want to have a quick conversation about, like, how are other customers doing this, or what are some of the best practices that they can get. So people leverage me for that, to try and understand, like, how
it's like learn from the market.
Learn from the market. Like, what are other customers doing? I get that question all the time, is what are other customers doing? And another question that I get a lot is, what are we not asking now that all of your other customers have asked? Or basically, like, what am I missing? Wow. And I think that's a really good question for people to ask, because maybe there is something in the back of my mind where I'm thinking, we haven't spoken about that yet. Like, why haven't they asked me about go live, or why haven't they asked me about planning, for example?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, actually.
Yeah.
Probably throws you a bit. You're like, oh gosh, what are they asking?
Yeah, and at least, well, my personality, I'm kind of like, I'll always try and come up with an answer.
Yeah.
And, but you don't always have to, because sometimes they have, like, really covered everything.
Yeah. But hey, if you can always go back and say, do you know what? That's a really good question. I'm going to go figure that out. And then that's showing authenticity. And I know that one of the key areas that you mentioned is, like, tracking the usage of the customer. So is there anything that you do as a creative way of sending the customer ROI reminders? Because they might be using the platform thinking, oh, this is great, but not using it to its full extent. And there's so many more areas that they could use that really help benefit their team. Or they might not be using it at all and actually missing out. So what are some ways that you do?
Yeah, so we have our own integration between Hook, and then we use a platform called Sales as well. So that's a really great way to be able to send out communications to to get these ROI return on investment metrics across. Sometimes it's a case of getting inactive users engaged. So trying to get people who haven't used your product as much. So sending them content to kind of show the value of what their peers are doing and what they could be missing out on based on the fact that they're not leveraging your software. And then there's kind of wins that you can send out as well. Like, hey, you've logged X amount of activities, or you've done X, Y, or Z, and celebrating these key milestones along with your customer as well, I think is really important. And then from a value perspective, or that value touch point that you talked about, we would do that with the key stakeholder. I actually haven't been doing that over email, but maybe I could consider it now that you've asked the question. But yeah, we would generally do it like on a call and just kind of go through like, okay, here's a quick rundown of what's been happening in the platform.
Someone I spoke to in our retention seekers community, Andrew Henry, who works at Reward Gateway, he said, I cannot take credit for this. He said that he sends quarterly email updates to his customers of like, this is what you're getting from this, and this is the ROI. And it's really nice for them to be able to reflect back, and then they can also circulate that within the team instead of if nobody was on the call that was needed to be.
Yeah, I should steal that one too.
Thank you, Andrew. Are you guys big on customer advocacy? Because I know that that's something also that really helps with customer engagement.
Yeah, definitely big on customer advocacy as much as we can. We try to run a lot of customer events as well. And if you have the opportunity to do that, I think it's a really great way to get people together. And in a non-work way, I would say. So we've had a lot of success running dinners, which are quite common, but that can be hard for parents, for people who live outside of London. It's after hours, you're exhausted, the train is down. But that we have run successful dinners. But what we've done recently is actually a breakfast event, which was really good because it's kind of starting off your day well. You're getting a lot of customers and potential customers in the room together. We don't set any criteria for discussion. People are free to talk about what they want. But of course, when, a lot of people have the same thing in common, which is, we use Hook, or we're exploring Hook, then it can lead to a really good conversation and a very natural way for people to talk about Hook, advocate for the product, and then also for people to just feel like they've got value. They've maybe made a network connection, maybe someone that they'll stay in touch with over the future. So we're definitely big on that. And yeah, any other ways that we can do advocacy, we try to explore those as well, whether that's like referrals, like setting up a formal referral, or getting feedback from our customers as well, and using these key stakeholders across different businesses to advocate for what's going to come next in the product, like what's going to be the roadmap for the next year.
Yeah. And breakfasts are better from experience doing events because it's cheaper. You don't have to spend so much money on alcohol.
Yeah, fine.
Well, I mean, if somebody's turning up at 8 a.m. drinking, that's maybe question how late they've been working. But it's always a good thing. But that's a really, really great idea, and just bringing them and giving them something as well. Like, people love to network and meet other people, and it, as you said, starts off their day in the right way. Yeah,
exactly. And like, they don't have to kind of do it, I guess, outside of working hours, if you think about it like that. So yeah, we will definitely be continuing to do those as well, and people get a lot of value from them.
Yeah, you mentioned about focusing on quieter accounts because those are the ones that need the help. It's really difficult if they are quiet to get them to speak. So what are some tactics that you're using, or questions that you're asking to get them speaking and kind of switching to more of a vocal account?
Yeah, there are lots of different tactics you can use. I think this is more, I think it depends on how dire the situation is.
But just not returning your call.
You've
been ghosted.
Yeah, I'm quite lucky. I don't have any limitations around budget. For example, like I can, spend a little bit of money on my corporate card without too many questions being asked. And I know not everyone is in that position, but if they are, sometimes if it's like quite a bad situation, I would maybe send a gift. You could use something like Reach Desk, for example, if that's something that you can leverage in your company, or if you can send a gift to be like, hey, I've been trying to get your attention, what's going on? So if it's quite a dire scenario, you could try something like a bit snappy to get their attention, like send them a gift, send them cookies, brownies, whatever it might be.
Send them a ghost cookie.
Send them a ghost cookie. Yes. And it's not even Halloween.
Exactly.
So yeah, you could do something clever like that, which I know that like SDR teams and AEs have to do all the time, because it is generally more difficult to get prospects on the phone than it is customers. But then I would maybe just try and figure out if it's one particular stakeholder that you have in mind, send a fairly frank email like, hey, we haven't heard from you in 6 weeks. This is the milestone that we're trying to achieve next. If I don't get your guidance, if I don't get your advice, this is what we're planning to do. I'm not sure if you'll be aligned to that. Can you please like come back to me? Or, you kind of have to read the situation, but I would send a frank email like that. If it's appropriate and if you can, maybe try to reach out to somebody else in the organization. If you can, reach out to a peer of the person you're trying to get a hold of and just say, thought this might be relevant for you. Could we get on the phone to speak? How can we have a conversation about this? One thing to be very mindful of is if you are trying to find other people in an organization to reach out to, is if you go above or below the key stakeholder that you have in mind or that you've been speaking to, is that you then can find yourself in this kind of trap situation. If you go to their boss, it might look like you're calling them out for having not responded. You might not show them in a good light. So that's just one thing to be careful of. And if you go to someone below them, then you might get stuck with that person forever and they can't sign off on your renewal, for example. So I think you do have to be quite mindful of how you engage the customer in question, because you need to, just kind of think about the dynamics of this situation.
Is there an example that you could share where you have gone above and it's not worked out well and how you navigated that?
Is there an example where it hasn't worked out well? There definitely are examples of that, and I definitely had that when I was an AE before I started working with customers. I definitely went above the level I was at, and that person would have responded to say, please work with X, Y, or Z. It's something that I'm always actually really, really mindful of, especially in the world of customer now, because I'm always trying to be conscious of moving dynamics.
It's a tricky thing to navigate, isn't it?
Oh my God, it is. And especially in CS right now, when every CS org is being overturned, like people are getting targets where they didn't have targets before.
Yeah.
People have to look after revenue where they didn't have to look after revenue before. People are, their jobs are changing so much now.
People are scrambling.
People are scrambling, yeah.
It's a bit chaotic.
Yeah, there's so much change right now. I don't think I've spoken to a customer this year who, and by the way, all of my customers are in CS or account management as well. So I'm very aligned with what my customers are doing. But I don't think I've spoken to a customer this year who hasn't said, oh, we've changed our team dynamic, or we've changed our org chart, or, KPIs, for example.
There's a lot of change, but you've got to adapt to it. And it seems like you guys are doing a great job at it with Hook. And the last point around splitting time, I know we've touched on it slightly, of splitting time with MIA customers and ones that are more vocal. But if we were to look at Reb's diary of the week, how would you be splitting your time across your accounts? And is there anything that you follow each week?
Yeah, my diary, which most people can relate to, but it's probably 4 or 5 hours of customer calls a day. It is very, very, very hands-on, because I speak to probably a handful of people from every account. So I'm always trying to keep people engaged across different levels of the org chart. And there's different reasons for speaking to people. Sometimes it's quite technical and we're trying to get an integration set up and we're trying to run some best practices there. And that's with the CS ops person or a revenue ops person. And then sometimes I might be speaking to the chief customer officer to say hey, this is how we're going to deliver against your milestones for next year, for example. And you don't need to cross-contaminate, but you don't need to kind of blur those lines. So I would have 2 separate calls for that. I always try to spend my time most on the accounts that need it the most. So I could have a lower size customer in terms of ARR, but I know that they're an amazing advocate for Hook. They will always give us a customer reference. They will do a lot of great business for us, outside of just that ARR value that they're paying us. So I always try to rationalize it with what else is the customer bringing to the business. So I try to spend my time with whoever needs it the most, and I don't always just cut off people who pay below 50K or something like that. That just doesn't work at all. Not worth my time. What is that like? I don't get out of bed for less than 10 grand.
Yours is 10, mine's 20.
You're 20?
I wish.
I I don't do it just by ARR. However, if I were advising someone who had a huge book of business and if they had an NRR number, a GRR number that they have to look after, I would say like be ruthless, spend more time on the ones that are paying you more. But the way I think about it is, who needs my time right now? Is this a churn risk or not? So if a customer is coming to me with some best practices ask for board reporting, let's say, for example, and their their renewal is 6 months down the line, I might think, okay, their renewal is far away. This isn't going to make or break the churn right now. So I can give them a timeline by which I'll get back to them, but it won't be the first thing on my list. I also think about, when it comes to prioritizing my time, I also think about the value that something is going to give, like debugging something that one person picked up on across an account where, they've got 100 people logging in. Am I really going to spend a lot of time like assisting support or like trying to get this done when it's like impacting like a very, very small number of people versus something that is like someone's asking me for an adoption report, they want to see lots of really, really valuable information and I can spend my time on that. That's where I would kind of make a judgment call on that, on how I spend my time.
So you have 4 to 5 hours of customer calls a day. Do you have a block for like the ad hoc, because people are like emailing all the time. I have this and I'm the worst person for getting sidetracked. I'll be working on something, someone will email me, I'll then go and reply to them, and then I'll come back to the project. Next thing I know, I've got a meeting and I've wasted the last hour that I had booked to do this one thing. Time blocking is something that I am a huge advocate for, but don't do. I'd love to say that I do it. But there was one of our community hosts, Brian Mulry, excuse my French, he said he has bullshit hours where he's like got that hour in his diary where he can just focus on like the little admin tasks and the things that aren't going to move the needle. Do you have things like that in your diary?
Yeah, I do. I'm not good at sticking to it, but I really, really, really try. So at 8:45 every day until 9:30, I try to go in and do all of that like admin-y weird stuff. Like we also use this tool called Linear, that it's like a Jira tool basically where we do like all of our project management. And most CSMs or AMs don't think about this because product is product and that's it. But whereas in a startup, we have to think a lot about product and like what are the new releases and how are implementations going. So there's a lot of noise in there. So I kind of come in and try to clear Slack. I also have a Slack channel with every customer, by the way.
Oh, wow.
So I try to clear Slack, Linear, and email for those 45 minutes first thing in the morning. And then what I try to do is for every call I have that day is try to set a 15-minute or 30-minute block after the call to do all of my follow-ups like straight away or as quickly as possible.
Smart.
But yeah, if you do the maths, that's like 8 hours of time, like 5 hours of actually speaking to my customers and then like follow-ups for like 3 hours. That's a whole day. So it's not always feasible and I have to be dynamic. I have to be flexible with that. But yeah, I agree with you. I definitely recommend time blocks where you can make it happen and where it's realistic.
Can you share some best practices for when you don't have that time to have, because we'd all loved that 30-minute buffer after meetings so that we can remember what was said, digest it, and then send a killer follow-up.
Yeah.
Are you using AI note takers? How are you making sure that all of your notes are concise and that you can come back, whether it be in the evening, and remember everything?
If you are working in revenue in in the 21st century, like if you're working in revenue today, you have to be using a note taker, because like you need AI to summarize your calls, and it's not going to give you the most perfect next steps, but it will give you a really good guideline on what needs to happen. It doesn't always capture all of the nuance, so you have to put a lot of personal touch to it. But yeah, I use a call recorder for absolutely every call, and if for some reason it doesn't automatically join and we're 5 minutes in, I'm like, hold on, like let me add the call recorder.
Not here.
Yeah. So definitely, and if your organization doesn't let you have a call recorder for whatever reason, like try and record manually using like Google Meets, or whatever software you use. Try and do the manual recorder, because then it just saves you so much time just knowing like what has been said. So yeah, at the end of the day, if I have to do like 5 follow-ups, I just try to very quickly sift through the recorder and very quickly like get I think it's better to send like an 80% kind of half-baked follow-up same day than sit down, take a full hour to do it and send it like 100%. Like I try to capture as much as I possibly can and get that out, because at least then those next steps can start moving.
Do not wait until the next day.
Yeah, you'll forget about it.
Yeah, we've got a 24-hour rule, has to be done within that 24 hour. But I think even that is too much. I think it should be within a couple of hours afterwards, because it's all about timing.
Same day where possible, because even if something comes in at like 5:30 on a Tuesday, waiting until like 9 on a Wednesday, like sometimes that just doesn't cut it. But you do have to have flexibility as well. And like sometimes I have a working day where I start at 8 a.m. because I'm speaking to Australia, and then I finish at like 8 p.m. because I'm speaking to San Francisco. You kind of have to adapt for other people's working hours as well. So
set those expectations that you are only human and you can't do it all. As you said, set the expectations with the customer. They will understand it, and if you have that open communication, then it should be quite easy to understand that you can't always be replying within a minute.
I will just say one thing on that with setting expectations. Earlier this week, I was on a call with a customer, very important call. It was like make or break about whether they were going to make a certain decision. And the call was 30 minutes, and then I was back to back for the next 2 hours. And I said to them, I'm back to back for the next 2 hours. And then immediately after that, I will send you the follow up. And it's like, wait, why did I say that? I should have said, I'll come back to you today. But like, why didn't I set like just better expectations? Like I just really pigeonholed myself then into this like small budget of time. And then if something else came in and I didn't get that through, it's like I've broken the trust there, because they were expecting it at a certain time. I really slapped myself on the wrist for that one. I should have said shortly. Today. Instead of like, I was trying to be
2:15
genuinely
PM. You will get it.
That's basically what I did, because the call ended at 11. I knew I was in meetings until 1, and I said I will send it immediately at 1. And it's like, what?
You're like, sorry, so I've got a meeting, then I'm going to lunch, and I might pop to the toilet, and then I'll send your email. But you will have it by this time. No, I mean, expectations, but within boundaries of giving yourself
within reason,
the leeway.
Completely. Within reason.
Thank you for being so self-reflective. Reb. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation, and I've definitely learned a lot from it. I'm sure all of our listeners have as well. But to end this episode, as we do with every guest on Sales Unfiltered, what is one challenge you faced in your career or your personal life that shaped you to where you are today?
I think it's a really good question, and something that we should all be asking ourselves. And I knew this one was coming, so I had a bit of a think about it, but I didn't have to think for very hard, because in 2022, I had a moment that I'm sure lots of people can relate to, which is that I was let go from my job. And that was so difficult to manage, because sure, it was a professional scenario and it impacted my career. But it was so personal as well, because I took that as, a failure. I took it as, like that I wasn't doing the right things, that I didn't build the right network. I had only been in the company for about 5 months, and while they had done a huge round of layoffs before and a huge round of layoffs after, I was kind of like on my own in this redundancy situation, and I had agreed to move to Copenhagen for that company and then didn't go, and I'd given up my flat in London. So it really seeped into my personal life so much. And for about a month, I didn't do anything. I was extremely financially, I was extremely lucky because I was financially privileged. I was a normal level of financially privileged.
But she doesn't get out of bed for less than 10K a day. What does that tell you?
I was a normal level of financial privilege, but I was extremely lucky, basically, is what I'm trying to say. I was so lucky that I was in that situation.
And that you were smart with your money.
I was smart with my money. So I had like 6 months. I didn't have to get a new job for 6 months, but I took like a month to really reflect on it. But it knocked my confidence so much that I couldn't even bring myself to write an application for an opening role at my next company. I took it so personally, and I think probably we'll all experience a layoff in our lives, or you'll have to be someone to let someone go as well, just because of the nature of tech, because of the climate. I think we're largely through the worst parts of it now, but we've had a very, very rough couple of years in the SaaS industry, and I experienced it at a really small startup, and it took me a while to build back my confidence, but I would say that I shouldn't have taken it so personally. I think that was a learning. I should have like really tried to get back into the community like quite quickly after that. So yeah, that was, yeah.
Also, don't be hard on yourself. Like, you probably needed that 6 months.
I probably did. I was writing my master's. I needed to do my thesis. Like, I needed the time.
Enough. That is enough.
I actually did.
You're such an overachiever, Reb. I'm seeing this. It's good to sometimes, especially after you've been through something like that, whether you've been there for 5 months or 5 years, after leaving a job, you do need that separation. People go from job to job. And it's like when they say you bounce from relationship to relationship, like you need to be single, understand what it's like to sit with your own thoughts, and also really focus on yourself and your growth and where you want to go next. And you probably wouldn't be where you are now at Hook and performing as well as you are if you hadn't given yourself that space to breathe and actually like build up your confidence again.
I think that is definitely what I did do, and it was probably the right thing to have done. I will also say that it really made me evaluate what kind of company I wanted to work for, because that company was pre-Series A. It was really risky, and after that situation happened, I really evaluated, well, what did I want next? And I realized I want the same thing again. And I ended up at pre-Series A, like hardly any customers, like no processes, and I was like, great, sign me up. But having gone through that experience, it really validated what I did and didn't want, because I think a lot of advice at the time was like, oh, go join IBM, go join a big safe company. And I was thinking to myself, the layoffs are happening everywhere. It's not just this small company.
In the bigger companies.
Yeah, worse.
You're more of a number than a person.
Exactly.
You clearly went through a lot of self-development in those 6 months to build up that confidence. Could you share with our listeners some of the things that you worked on to be able to build that up?
Yeah, what I worked on was, what am I trying to get out of this? We're all here, we give so much of our time to our jobs. What is it that we're trying to get out of it? And that's something that I thought long and hard about. Like, what kind of environment do I want to be in? So I asked myself a lot of questions. And then because my confidence was pretty low, I started to build it back up by having lots of coffees, starting to go to events. I went to random conferences that I was not relevant for whatsoever. I think I went to, I did previously work in data. So I went to like Big Data London and like these different conferences that just weren't relevant for me, because I felt like it was good to expose myself to the world of work again. I was lucky in that I had the distraction or the panic of my thesis for my master's. But if I didn't have that, taking on another really important project would have been important during that time as well. So for someone else, if that's like athletics or, knitting, something else, I think taking on something big like that is a really good focus, because you've got this thing that you're working towards. That was that, like just spending my time wisely, like doing the networking, doing things that I enjoyed or needed to do.
And I also think, coming from a recruitment lens with the work that we do at Wiser Elite, if you've taken 6 month break, people think, oh gosh, people are going to look at that my CV and think, what did she do for those 6 months? Like, it will be a detriment to my progression. As long as you have something to show for those 6 months, like you did a thesis, you learned how to knit, you baked a cake, you took up a language, you used that time, because that's going to show so much about who you are as a person and how driven you are. And it's fine to take breaks. It's not fine necessarily to maybe sit and do nothing, but
maybe it is fine.
Maybe it is,
who knows? Like if you needed it. Yeah.
I watched the whole season of Grey's Anatomy. That's what I did. And now I'm a medical professional.
Yeah, you are qualified.
Thank you. That's what I will do if I ever take a break. But anyway, thank you so much, Reb, for sharing that. I really appreciate it. And I'm so happy that you have built up your confidence and found an incredible company like Hook, because it sounds like you're smashing it and they value you so much. But thank you for coming on this episode. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Sales Unfiltered. If you enjoyed this conversation, I would love for you to hit the subscribe button. And if you're feeling extra generous, leave us a quick review. See you next week.